Okay. So today, and I know the training today, I put buyer brokerage agreement and buyer consultation, and I hesitated to do that because I was a little worried if we're gonna have enough time to really cover everything. But I definitely want to get into that buyer brokerage agreement. So as everybody knows, guys, the whole NAR thing with the lawsuit, and now we're gonna have to have buyer brokerage agreements. And what I want everybody who's on the Zoom, everybody in this brokerage, everybody who's here, is, my biggest message to you guys is just now's the time to just keep it professional. Keep it, like you'll be fine. Everything's gonna work out. Over the last 5-10 years, our industry has had like its peaks and its valleys, its ups and downs, peaks and valleys. Okay. Can anybody tell me, like, I don't know, in the last 5-10 years, any peaks and valleys that our business has had, any, like, what has been like, anybody has any examples, anything that's happened recently?
COVID.
COVID?
Post-COVID had a bit of a.
Okay. So COVID, what happened in COVID? Like there was like a month there where we were like, oh my God, like our business is dead. We might not sell houses for months.
Right.
What else? Anything else? That's it. There's gotta be more.
The super low COVID.
Okay. Super low interest rate. So that, boom, that was a peak. I was like, okay, we're high now. Great. That's awesome.
We had the rate hikes. It's like 12 consecutive rate hikes.
Okay. And then that was supposed to like hurt our industry. Oh, well, now it's gonna kill us. Now we're gonna, we're not gonna be able. Well, guess what? If you're an agent that's not professional and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, but through all that, there's still people that are winning in our business. There's still realtors who are succeeding. There's still realtors who are breaking sales records. There's still realtors who are just moving along. The ups and downs are coming, but they're staying poised. They're just sticking to the plan. Maybe less transactions, okay, but they're still going steady. But there's always something, guys. There's always something. Remember when like Zillow became a brokerage and was offering to buy homes, and we all thought, well, that's it. We're never gonna get any listings now because Zillow is gonna get all the listings. Okay, where's that at? That went away. There's always something, guys. There's always something. This is now the next something. So in my opinion, this is just something that we kind of have to get through. And I think this is a positive thing. I really think now the fact that we're gonna be forced to do these buyer brokerage agreements, it's a great thing. It's a positive thing. It's gonna create transparency. Now what you guys need to know is that the rule changes and we don't have all the answers, and there's a lot of things in this document. What we're gonna go through today, it is new to me too. I mean, I've known about it, we've used it, but is it something we use like we use listing agreements? No, we haven't. Okay. So we're gonna learn about it together, and we're gonna go through it together. And this is absolutely not the last time. I want you guys, by the time July comes, to be prepared that you're gonna have to have this ready to go. I believe that you're gonna probably have to possibly show this every time you do a showing. You're gonna have listing agents that probably are gonna ask you, I need to see your brokerage agreement. I'm not sure how that even is gonna get enforced or how that's gonna work, but like we're not doing this for nothing. I'm sure there's gonna be somehow that it's gonna kept to make sure that we're doing it. So, and at some point we have to see what commission is put on there and all that stuff. But that's the mindset that I just want you guys to have. Today we're gonna go over this document. We're gonna show you how to fill it out. We're gonna go over things so that you understand it. I'm gonna give you my ideas and my thoughts on how we can have conversations with buyers about this, because for the most part, the entire document, you should be able to sit down with a buyer, and the only thing in this document that raises a little question is the part where it talks about commission. That's the only. The rest of the document is like, oh, okay, that's great, that's awesome, until you get to the part where it talks about the commission, and it's like, oh, well, so what does that mean? That means I have to pay you commission? Well, all right, we're gonna get into that. Okay. So I want you guys to be prepared, and you need to be prepared, guys. And you need to start figuring out how you can have conversations. What are these conversations going to be like? Next week, we're going to do sellers, and that's also going to be, we need to figure out how those conversations are going to go. How is the conversation going to go with the seller when the seller says, Okay, do I have to pay a buyer's agent's commission? Well, what's your rebuttal to that? Or how are buyers gonna know what, how's a buyer's realtor gonna know what we are paying in commission if we can't put it on the MLS? Well, what's your rebuttal to that? What's your response? So we need to know, like, what are these questions that are definitely gonna come up? I haven't had anything, and I've been on some listing appointments. I know some of you guys have been on listing appointments, and we haven't had any sellers really bring it up. At least nobody has mentioned it to me. But it's gonna come up. It's gonna come up. So I want you guys to be prepared. And then when you start sitting down with buyers to get these documents signed, now it's gonna be a conversation that has to be had. And the mindset really that I want you guys to have is that I want you to know that even though you might see this as like, now I have to sign something, I want you to know that like most consumers are probably surprised that they don't sign anything. So don't think like we're gonna throw something at them that they're gonna be like, most consumers that work with buyers and don't sign anything, a lot of them would probably sit there, yeah, I never signed anything with my realtor. I'm kind of surprised because anytime you do anything with any professional industry, you sign something. You're gonna sign a document. So don't think also that people are gonna be like, whoa, what's this? Like I've never had to sign this before. No, they're probably gonna be expecting it when you do that. But it is gonna require a conversation. It is going to require to do consultations. You're probably going to do more in office or Zoom consultations with buyers than you've ever had before. Okay. So let's jump into this, guys. I want to just walk through it. So this is pretty straightforward. We'll just put buyer's name. You got to put the buyer's name. And I'll just put LeBron James, Savannah James. Over here where it says real estate broker, you have to put my name. It's not like one of those documents where it says broker, but you sign it or you put your name. You actually have to put the broker's name, apparently. So you will put Element Real Estate Group. Now, the term of this agreement, my recommendation is how do you guys feel about, and I want to make this too, again, remember, this is new to all of us. This is not like, oh, I've been doing this for years. I'm going to show you guys now. No, we've been doing this for a while. My thought on this, and I want to get, our collective thoughts on this and see, your contributions. My thoughts on this is like, well, most buyers, should you really be working most buyers more than 3 months? Because right away, my thought goes into a 90-day agreement. Does that sound too little? Does that sound like now you might know, but there might be a buyer based on their circumstance that you might feel like, okay, this is going to take longer than 3 months, and then you can adjust. But your typical buyer, should you be doing an agreement for more than 3 months, or should you take longer than 3 months to close? Probably not. Or get them on their contract, not even close them, get them on their contract.
It just depends on the client. I have a client in
Just-
Brokerage here since November.
Yeah.
Over 50.
It just depends. It just depends. So my ideal, just like listing agreements, is probably just shoot for 6 months, but no less than 3 months. And by the way, you'll see on the second page of this document, which by the way, this document's only 2 pages, and then the third page is for signatures. On the second page, there's a termination. This is a very easy contract to terminate from either side. Super easy. So you're gonna see that even though we're doing this, at any point, buyer can just say, hey, I'm giving you written notice that I'm terminating the agreement. That's how it is. We'll talk more about those things. But you want to just basically put the date. So, we can put this starting May 1st. And then 6 months, we're looking at November. We'll just put November 1st. Okay. Now, this part here where it says paragraph 3, it's actually important. So apparently it is important how you fill this out. And the best way to tell you how you're going to fill this out is you're going to be very vague. Okay. You're going to be very vague on how you're going to fill it out. So type of property, all you got to put is what type of property it is. And you're going to basically ask your client, what are you looking for? Single family, townhouse, or condo? So let's just say the client's looking for single family. You might put single family and townhome. That's it. Simple. Okay. If they're looking for a condo, put condo. In location, you're going to put counties. You're not going to put cities. You're not going to put Because all of a sudden disagree, like let's say you put Miramar, Pines, Hollywood, Miami Lakes. All of a sudden they find the great house they like in Cooper City. All of a sudden this agreement is not, it's not, for whatever reason, they could be like, oh, well, we didn't buy a house in those cities. Okay. So you want to put the county. So you want to put Miami-Dade County and Broward County and whatever other possible county. If you think maybe West Palm Beach is a possibility or something else, you want to put those, okay? Price range, you want to put that based on the discussion with them, okay? And again, you want to give yourself room for what they might buy, okay? So if, again, if for some reason you find them a property that for some reason doesn't fall into this, and the buyer wants to get technical, it could say, well, this doesn't fall into this agreement, you know? So you want to be super, super big. So you don't have to put $1 to $1 million, but you could just put, you know, if a buyer's pre-approved at 500, for example, you could put something like, you know, between, you know, 350 to, and you already know they're approved in the 5, so let's just put 600 max. You know, you could put something like that. You're gonna have to know, like, okay, the buyer's looking in this area, this is what their wants are, this is what their pre-approved are. You know, think of your nightmare scenario, lowest price, and then just give yourself some wiggle room on a high price. All right. Then over here, you are gonna want to put if the buyer has been pre-approved or pre-qualified, and you're gonna want to put by who. So you could just put the company, the mortgage company that they're using. You don't necessarily have to put like the name and the LO and all that stuff, but you just put the company. All right. And then here for amount and terms, if any, typically what you're gonna, again, just very vague of the mortgage terms. So there you would put conventional or FHA. And you would want to put or a VA if they're a VA, and then you would want to put something like this: conventional 30-year fixed. Okay. And that's it. You wouldn't want to put the rate or the down payment. Those things can change. You just want to put whatever they're approved at. Okay. And then finally, for preferred terms and conditions, you're gonna want to leave that blank for the most part. That is just like, if there's any like weird scenarios that, again, this is new, this is like something that we're not accommodated to doing. But if there are any kind of preferred terms and conditions they're looking for, maybe they have to have a, you know, maybe they're short on closing costs, so they must have a seller concession of $5,000 or $10,000. You know, maybe you could put something like that in there. But for the most part, guys, you're just gonna leave that blank. That's part is gonna stay blank. Any questions so far about filling that out? Pretty straightforward. All right. Now, guys, you're gonna probably sit down and you're gonna want to talk about this. Now, here's my thought on this, guys, is I really eventually would want to put, I want to do this document very similar, but I want to add to it. Why do I want to add to it? Because right here it says broker's obligation, and it tells the consumer what we do. Now I could either add to this document eventually, or I could have a separate sheet, but we do a lot more than what this says. This says some very basic, essential things, but it's time that, like, we need to start letting consumers know everything we do. We really need to open up that curtain, because a lot of people, let's face it, a lot of consumers think that we showed them a house, we wrote a contract, and then we made $20,000. And a lot of them think like, wow, that's it. That's all you did, because they don't see everything that we do. They don't know the comp. They don't know how many of you have been late nights on your computer, early mornings on your computers, looking at properties, running comps, looking at deadlines, you know, there's so much more to what we do, and we need to really get better at showing all that. So this talks about basic stuff that we do. Use brokers' professional knowledge and skills, assist buyers in determining financial capability and financing options, discuss property requirements, Assist buyer to contract for property, so we write an offer. Monitor deadlines and close any resulting transaction. And then cooperate with real estate licensees working with seller. And that's it, like, that's all, that's our only obligation. Sure, that might be the obligation, but we just do a lot more than that. So my recommendation, we probably maybe have a document on the side. And everybody, by the way, I mean, this might be different for certain people. You know, some of you might offer something that another one of you doesn't offer. So maybe I feel like we should have something on the side, like an additional document to this, just showing, hey, these are all the things that we're gonna do for you. Okay. It also talks about number 4, paragraph B, talks about if you're working with other buyers. That scenario does come up. Like if you're working with another buyer and you're submitting an offer in the same property, you have to disclose that now to this buyer. Okay, so like in the past, like in those scenarios, some of you guys have been like, well, let's just submit the offers, we'll see who wins. You know, I'm not gonna obviously tell anything to anybody, but now we have to. Okay, and it's not a scenario that comes up, but it does. You know, when you're working with buyers looking in the same area and similar price range, it does. So if that happens, you need to let them know. Obviously, you won't reveal any of the terms of anybody's offers, but you need to let them know, hey, I do work with other buyers and we are submitting another offer on this property. Obviously, we have to adhere to fair housing. Yes, I know you might want to be in certain areas, certain neighborhoods. We can't, you know, we can't steer people, you know. So when that client comes and says, oh, I want to be where all the Venezuelans are, we can't, you know, take them to where all the Venezuelans are. We have to show them properties based on, you know, based on the properties that they're qualified. All right. Let's see what else. All right, so then it talks about buyer's obligations, which is fine. Buyer's obligations, buyer agrees to cooperate with broker in accomplishing these objectives. Conducting all negotiations and efforts to locate suitable property only through broker, and referring to broker all inquiries of any kind from real estate licensees, property owners, or any source. So the same thing as a listing agreement. You know, if somebody reaches out to the seller, they gotta tell you, same thing here. For some reason, they go to an open house, they come in contact with anybody, they gotta go through you, okay? Providing broker with accurate personal and financial information requested by broker. It even says buyer authorizes broker to run credit to verify, which I would obviously let client know that's not practice. Like I don't run your credit, that's for the mortgage, you know, but it's there. Being available to meet with broker at reasonable times. Indemnifying and holding broker harmless from and against all losses, damage, costs, and express of any kind, including attorney fees and liabilities to any person that broker incurs because of acting on buyer's behalf. Okay. Not asking or expecting to restrict the acquisition of a property according to race, color, religion, sex, handicap, no discrimination. Consulting an appropriate professional for legal, tax, environment, engineer. Yeah, just basically let them know we also don't give you legal, tax advice, things like that. So those are the buyer's obligations. And again, as questions come up, this is pretty straightforward. As questions come up when you're having this, I feel like ultimately my conversation with a buyer right now here would be like, well, these are the duties that you have to give to me, which essentially is anytime you run into a property, let me know about it. If you want to go to an open house, or you, of course, you could go into the open house, but if for some reason that realtor wants to engage in any negotiation talk or anything about the property, refer it to me. Okay. Anytime you go to a new construction you should educate them prior to going to a new construction to let you know as well. Okay. You should do the same thing for open houses. Prior to going to open houses, let me know that you're going to open houses. You don't want your clients thinking that to do it after, always prior. Okay. So that's pretty much it. And to let you know, most part, you know, again, I've never had any legal issues. I'm a very, you know, I'm all about honesty, integrity, communication. So you don't have to worry about any legal issues ever happening, anything like that. And then just to let you know, I mean, I will recommend you if you want me to recommend you to any legal advice or anything like that, but we are technically not attorneys, so technically can't give you legal advice. Okay. But I feel like this part of your conversation when you're having your buying consultation will be pretty straightforward until you get now to number 6 and number 7. That's when I think questions will start to come up. So the very first thing is the retainer. So I guess in some markets, in our market, this is not common. Maybe in other states and other markets, it might be common to pay a retainer, that a buyer will pay a real estate broker, real estate agent, a retainer for their services, which may or may not be refunded. Okay. I would put $0. That's what, you know, again, I don't, in all of this, guys, I still feel like the conversations with sellers are gonna lead to them realizing that they should pay a buyer's agent's commission. And I sorry, guys, I got disconnected for a second. Hopefully, you guys are still here. Yeah. All right, so anyways, I don't know how far you guys got, but we're at number 6, retainer. So in some markets, I guess it's customary to do that. We don't ever do that, so the retainer would be 0. What David was actually saying was that he can see how some realtors would take advantage of that and charge a retainer up front, and basically not, you know, not do the work or whatever it may be. If you think about it, some realtors might see it sort of as a cancellation fee in a way, like something to protect against, like, well, if I'm going to show you properties, I'm going to do all this, and then if you cancel or it doesn't work out, it's kind of like a cancellation fee in a sense. Because if I remember correctly, there is no space for cancellation fee here. It's not like the listing agreement, but we'll get to that part. But my recommendation, the way I would do this starting July, is I would put 0. Well, could that change in the future based on how practices change? It could. All right. Now let's talk about compensation. This is the big one. All right. So it says here, basically, broker's compensation is due from the buyer to us minus
Vic, we can't see the,
compensation we are able to collect from a seller or a real estate licensee who is working with the seller.
Victor, we can't see the agreement on the screen anymore.
Oh, sorry. That's why I was like that. Can you see it now?
Wait, it's loading. Yeah, we see it now.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So number 7 is pretty straightforward. So this talks about that the buyer is going to pay us our compensation with minus whatever we're able to collect from the seller. So if we're able to collect from the seller what our compensation here says, then the buyer doesn't have to give us anything. So how are you going to fill this out? Well, my recommendation And what I wanna do is I'm gonna put 3%. Okay. Or, hold on. Plus 495, because that's the brokerage fee, of the total purchase price or other consideration for the acquired property. So you could put a dollar amount, you could put a percentage, but obviously you probably put a percentage. So what does that mean? So that means, and the way that I would explain to it is like, well, when we look at properties, my commission is that for me representing you at this point, you should have already explained your value, done your buyer consultation, given them your value proposition, all those things. My commission for representing you, for making sure everything you've already talked about deadlines, making sure they don't lose their escrow deposit, all the protections of which we'll do a lot more training on, a lot more dialogue on, so we get that perfect by July. My commission is 3%. Okay. Now there's a possibility you will not have to write me a check for anything. Okay. Now that commission will be paid by the seller. Whatever is not covered by the seller, you would owe me. So for example, let's say a seller's paying 2.5% commission. I would get my 2.5% commission from the seller, and I would get my other 0.5% from you. Okay. Now there's a lot of other questions that come through my head when I have that. I start putting myself in the consumer shoes, and I start wondering, okay, well, they might ask me certain things like, well, how is it, like, what if I don't have enough money? What if I don't have this? Okay, well, in my head, if I know they don't have enough money to give me my, let's say 0.5% or 1%, whatever it is, then we could always come back and amend this. I can decide, well, I'm just gonna try to amend this. Okay, or I as an agent, I can try to decide to just try to get more from the listing agent. Some of you guys are really great at negotiating more commission from the listing agents. I've seen you guys like just the commission's 2%, and somehow you end up with 2.5 or 3%. So that's, you can do that. All right. But that is how that's going to work. Plus we have the 495 transaction fee. The 495 transaction fee, basically the way I always explain it is because we have certain costs, compliance, and certain documents that we have to hold on, and we have to deal with these audits. As we are a professional licensed industry. We are regulated in a sense, by DVPR and FREC. So we have to maintain costs, and so there's just back office costs that have to do with that. Okay. And most of you, 99% of the time, have no problem having an issue with the brokerage fee. But this is how it's going to work starting in July. Now, in my honest opinion, I think sellers are still going to pay. I keep telling you guys that I still think sellers are going to pay commissions. I've already thought about if that question comes up, I feel like we should probably go into listing agreements already knowing what homes are for sale, what's the competition, and finding out what they're offering. And you're like, well, how are we going to know if the MLS is not there? We're going to call. And we're going to find out what the competition, or we could try to look at past sales too. We could try to look, like now come July, we could probably look at past sales and say, hey, this is what in the last 6 months, everybody who has sold a home in this area, this is how much compensation for a buyer they've given. What would you like to do, Mr. Seller? 80% gave 2.5, 20%, 10% gave, 2%, 3%, and we could look at that data and figure the data and put it in the best way possible so that the seller can make an informed decision about what they want to offer as compensation. Okay. But I think it's still going to be beneficial. So when I make those calls and I sit down with my seller and I'm like, well, the guy across the street is offering 2.5%. The guy 2 blocks away is doing 3%, and so forth and so forth. What do you want to offer seller? And leave it up to them. See what they want to do. Okay, so I still think there's ways that we can have a dialogue with the seller they're gonna make sense. It's gonna make sense for them to say, yeah, okay, I'm gonna pay a buyer's commission. Trust me, guys, if it didn't make sense for sellers to pay a buyer's agent's commission, we would have stopped doing it a long time ago. But there's a reason why it makes sense. Now, the one thing that I recommend we don't say, or we try to avoid saying, is that if we don't pay a commission, they're not gonna show properties. The realtors are not gonna show our properties. Right? Why would we not want to say that? I'm asking you, why would we not want to say that? Anybody on the chat? Why would we not want to say that? Why would we not want to say, hey, seller, if you don't pay realtors a commission, then they're not going to show this property.
Because then they might feel like we're forcing them into it.
Right? What's up, brother? Hold on 1 second, guys. So hold on 1 second, guys. I'm going to put a pause. That box is not here. So if those are the previous items, so it's still there. I was looking at those, but I don't think you can. But you want? Hold on. Well, here's the thing, guys, too. We're kind of throwing ourselves under the bus if that's what we're putting out there to the consumers, too. Like we're throwing ourselves under the bus. And you're absolutely right, too. Juju, you're right. We don't want to make them feel like we're forcing them into that. It has to be we wanted to make it look like it's their decision, like that they are reasoning that this makes sense to do this. Okay? But we also don't want to, like, I feel like if we just start telling, and especially how, imagine it's a client that you're gonna help them buy, then you're telling them, oh, so are you not showing me this property because they're not paying commission? Like, we want to avoid giving us that reputation that, oh, well, we're not going to show it. Now, on the buyer side, since this is technically we're going over buyers, what's that conversation going to be like? What are you going to say when you do run into a potential listing that isn't paying commission? Let's say, which, by the way, you could run into that today all the time. We run into it all the time with for sale by owners. How many times do you run into a for sale by owner not paying a commission and the client's interested in seeing it? You try to negotiate, or you tell the buyer, hey, you're gonna go at your own risk with this guy. And how many times, man, I get at least 3 to 5 calls a year from like a friend or somebody that knows me, trying to tell me a story about their family member's deposit now being at risk because they didn't use a realtor. And it's like, yeah, no, they're gonna lose their 10 grand because they were supposed to, they missed their financing deadline, or they missed the inspection deadline, or whatever, happens all the time. So is that buyer, if you did a great consultation, that buyer then needs to decide, like, yeah, do I really want to go at this alone and risk, paying more, because you're not gonna have anybody negotiating for you. How many of you guys have negotiated credits? How many guys have you negotiated thousands of dollars in credits, thousands of dollars in price reductions? Yeah, I see you guys shaking your head. You're like, yeah, we do that for our clients. Is that client now going to be able to do that for themselves? No, not necessarily. Maybe they could. I'm not saying not everybody, but a lot of consumers, no, they don't know. A lot of consumers are not going to be aware of deadlines and inspections, and then what do I do? And then, oh, there's open permits. There's a lien. What does that mean? Should I close? I gotta sign a whole harmless now? How do I that's why, guys, we are still gonna be needed to give them that guidance and that understanding of what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Because that's another thing we do. We give them options, but I know a lot of you guys, and pretty much everybody here that I'm seeing, you care a lot about your clients, that you wouldn't let them do something that you wouldn't do. Or at least you'll explain the risks. And if they really want to go ahead and move forward, all right, cool. But I told you the risks of doing this. You're not going to let your clients do something that's going to bite them in the ass in the future. Unless you tell them that's going to come and bite you possibly. But if you still want it, okay, go. It's fine. So that's how you're going to handle those conversations. But that happens today. That happens all the time today, guys. So anyway, so you're going to put 3% here, 495. These two, I would always put 5% and 3% here. So B and C are referring to a lease, and C is referring to a lease with an option to buy. Now, here's what I would tell my client. Hey, I know I'm helping you to buy. We're not renting anything, but in the 0.1% scenario that maybe you find a dream house, but for some reason they're not selling it yet, or they want to do a lease with an option to buy, my commission would be 5% for the lease and 3% of the purchase price of the option that you're buying it for. So I would still fill that out. It's not gonna apply 90, probably maybe once in a blue moon, somebody will do one of these deals. We do an option to lease maybe like once a year in the whole brokerage. Again, it's very rare. So, but still put it there just in case. But that's what that means. Is in the event that the house we find, or you never know what scenario we can run into. You might, but this is the house you guys want, but maybe for some reason we need to lease it for a little bit, purchase it 6 months, a year down the road. This is how you would do that. Guys, any questions about this so far? Any contributions, any thoughts, anything that's going through your mind? Because this is like the bulk of it right here. This is the main part when you do this presentation. When you sit down with a buyer, you're probably going to spend the most part in this section. Okay. So does everybody kind of understand how you're going to present it? That my commission is 3%. In the event that the seller is paying, now I will get my commission from the seller, but in the event that the seller is only paying 2.5 or 2, I would get my remaining amount from you. You would have to pay that at closing. You might wonder, like, another thing to know is that if you put here, instead of putting 3%, if you put lesser amount, let's say you put 2.5, or let's say you put 2.5 or 2%, and the seller's offering 3%, they're only going to pay you what you put here. So you always want to put 3%. You might as well put 3% every time. Now, the only time that might hurt you is if the seller's paying more than 3%. So yeah, but as long as you're doing, as long as your 3% should be what you always put. Because if you put more than 3%, then the buyer's like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to pay you a lot more, So it doesn't make sense.
Is there a way of putting, how we always use additional terms to put different things? Is there a way of adding a verbiage or clause that in the event that the seller is offering to pay more, you would get paid whatever the seller is offering?
You could. I don't know if that's so. My first initial answer to that is, can I just put verbiage to say if the seller's pay more, then I'll pay more? Yes, but it might violate the whole NAR settlement thing. By the way, guys, another thing that I want to be clear that is that this document might change slightly by the time July rolls around. I think it'll be more or less the same thing, but it might change a little bit slightly. And I'm just not sure what you're saying now violates that new rule. Today, right now, 1,000%. Do whatever you want. But I don't know if based on new rules with NAR, based on the settlement, if you're able to do that or not.
In the event that seller.
But let's keep a pin on that question, and that's a good question to ask, to like try to find out. Yeah, we could always ask. Even if you call the legal hotline about this thing, they'll tell you like, well, we're still learning too. We're still figuring out. We don't know. We don't have answers to everything yet. So, but that's a good one. All right, guys, moving on. So if you have any questions about that, take me back. It's okay, but I'm gonna move on. After that, guys, pretty simple. Number 8, protection period. Similar to the protection period on a listing agreement. It basically says that if the buyer cancels this agreement or the agreement expires or whatever, if in 180 days, which is 6 months, the buyer finds a house that you showed them, the commission's owed. The same thing with the listing agreement. The listing cancels, but they try to sell it to a buyer that showed the property while you have the listing, you are earning that commission. Now you're gonna probably fight for that commission because it's not always easy, that simple, but that's what that says. Number 9, early termination So that says buyer may terminate this agreement at any time by written notice to broker, but will remain responsible for paying broker's compensation if from the early termination date plus protection period, if applicable. Buyer contracts to acquire any property which prior to the termination was found by buyer or called to buyer's attention by the broker. Buyer may terminate this agreement anytime by written notice, in which event buyer will be released from all further obligations under this agreement. So this is actually an easier, and by the way, so use this. I mean, it is what it is. It's an easier contract to get out of than the listing agreement, because the listing agreement, you kind of have to agree to like cancel. Both sides have to agree. On this one, only the buyer, basically, buyer may terminate this agreement. Okay. I would spin this. I know on your guys' end, you see it on that. So easy for the buyer to just, oh, well, I'm canceling this. But spin this as a way, like, hey guys, like when I'm sitting down with a buyer, I'm gonna say, by the way, the early termination, you could at any time, if I do anything wrong, if you're not happy with my service, you can cancel this contract. I'm not trying to rope you in for 3 months, 6 months, whatever the term is. This is not about that, you know. I'm not. So at any point, if you're not happy with my service, you can cancel. Here's what I would add to that if I were you guys. I would add, but the only thing I do ask is if you do decide to cancel because of something that I did and that you let me know and you make me aware, and give me an opportunity to maybe fix that, or give me an opportunity to have a talk about it, and just to make sure that you're understanding everything correctly and that we're on the same page. Like, let's just have a communication about it and give me an opportunity. That's all I ask, you know? And I think people will respect that. People will look at that like, okay, well, something happened. I'm not sure. I'm just gonna call and cancel this buyer agreement. No, talk to me about it. Let's have a conversation. Let's just be clear on our communication. And I think most people that will work with you are gonna appreciate that, and that's just gonna win them over again as you're going through your presentation. Like, okay, I like that. Let's, you know, if there's something you did wrong, you'll be, you know, I can talk to you about it. I can tell you how I feel, and that happens. Which, you know, most of the time, guys, your buyers, everybody here, you know, your buyers work with you great, and you never have any issues. But it does happen sometimes, so it's good to have. Okay. Dispute resolution. Any unresolved dispute between buyer and broker will be mediated. So if there's any disputes or anything like that, we would do mediation. Never been to mediation, so that, you know, luckily, you know, I'm not in the business to start going through those things. I hate going through courts and all that stuff, so I always try to avoid that at all costs. And yeah. Buyer may assign this agreement to another broker. This agreement will bind and inure to broker and buyer's heirs, personal representatives, successors, and assigns. All right. All right. So final page, right? Single agent notice, and we're also going to do the consent to transition to transaction broker, just like how we do it on the listing agreement. So again, single agency means you have a fiduciary duty. That means you have to deal honestly and fairly, but you also have to be loyal. You have to practice full confidentiality, obedience, full disclosure, accounting for all funds, everything. So what you're going to tell that buyer is like, hey, so I'm going to represent you as a single agent. Most people out there represent their clients as a transaction broker because they don't want to take on the liability that being a single agent takes. But I always will represent you as a single agent. Okay, that means I owe all these duties to you. All right, so I essentially like have my arms around you. I'm taking care of you. I represent you like as if I'm buying the house for myself. Okay, now in the event that I bring you to a listing, by the way, not just a listing of yours, but a listing of the brokerage, okay? We have to move to transition to transaction broker, okay? Even if it's like, you know, a listing within the brokerage, that happens sometimes, but it could be your own listing too, whatever it may be. So in the event that I do bring you to a property that I'm working for the seller, then I would downgrade to consent to transition to transaction broker. Yeah, then I would downgrade to a transaction broker. Now, what does that mean? I owe you all the same thing. The main thing is confidentiality now becomes limited. Because I cannot tell the buyer that you're willing to pay a higher amount, but I also can't tell you that the seller is willing to take a lesser. But I still have to be honest, I have to deal fairly, I have to account for all funds, I still have all those duties. I still have to disclose any material facts that are wrong with the property. All those things, that's law. I have to do those things. Okay? I just cannot tell you any details in negotiations that might be detrimental to the seller, or I can't tell the seller anything that might be detrimental to you. So confidentiality becomes limited. Okay? So after that, signatures, there's a special clause or an additional term section that you can fill out. You would have to send this not just to the associate, but the broker. So both you and I have to sign this agreement. And that is the gist of it. All right, guys, talk to me. Any questions, any feedback, any contributions, any thoughts? How do you feel? Anybody on the chat? You guys on the Zoom can talk too. Guys, take this serious. Come July, I promise you, you don't want to get hit with like, oh my God, I gotta do this because I have to show a property and the listing agent's asking me for my agreement and he won't show it to me unless I have this agreement signed. How do I do this? How do I get going with this? So you want to sit down, you want to practice. There's people that are already practicing this with their clients now because this, remember, even though the settlement is not approved and it's not going to get finalized until like November, the National Association of Realtors says we don't care about if it's approved or not, like we are making this change come July. So we have 2 months, guys, to like really get this down packed, really be prepared. And every time, every buyer, anytime you're going to show a property, you have to do this. Okay? I know there's been some questions like about, well, if I'm doing an open house, do they all have to, does everybody need to sign a brokerage agreement? No, of course not. That would be very tedious. But and the way the reality is that you're doing a job for the seller in that case, so you don't have to. You do not have to have them sign a brokerage agreement because you're working for the seller. You know what I mean? Like you're doing an activity that's working for the seller. Now, the minute you start talking to that buyer about submitting an offer directly through you and stuff like that, then yes, you have to do that.
When you're gonna represent the buyer.
When essentially, yeah, when you're pretty much already at that point where you're gonna represent them, yes, you have to do this. Even if you're not gonna show them a property, but you're gonna have to do this. Okay. Sending them properties, no, you do not have to have this to send them properties. Sending them properties is just looked at as like you're just giving them information, but you're not actually representing them yet. Okay, so emailing them properties, having a phone conversation, that's all fine. It's literally when you're showing them properties. When you're gonna, that's like initially the thing you're gonna do. Or in the event that you are not going to show them and they're gonna put an offer without seeing it, then you gotta get this also signed. You also have to get this signed, guys. Even if they're not gonna see it, because we run into those buyers that don't want to see the property, I just want to put an offer. You have to do this. Okay?
I have a question,
Talk to me.
kind of twofold. Can you walk through the conversation you would have if a buyer says, okay, well, can I put your commission, let's say the seller's only paying you 1 or 2% and I have to make up the difference. Can I put it into my loan? Like, can you just walk through the conversation of how that would sound?
Okay, that's a good question. Hold on, because I have like 2 lenders here, 3 lenders.
Perfect.
Angela, you available? Hold on. That's a great question. All right, so here's the microphone. So Danielle was asked, okay, so in the event that, what's the conversation like with a buyer in the event that they ask, well, listen, let's say my buyer brokerage agreement says 3%, but the seller is only offering 2%, let's say. Or whatever, 1.5. So that other, let's say the seller's paying 2%, that other 1% would come from the buyer. Now, in the conversation that the buyer says, can that be added to my loan, or can I somehow finance that? What is that allowed, and what is that conversation like?
Well, you cannot, the only way to finance closing costs, right, is technically, it's a little bit tricky, right? It's like a psychological thing. You can only finance it if, let's say, the property overappraises, right? So let's say you have a $500,000 property purchase price and it appraises 505, that's where you can have the conversation then and say, listen, let's change the purchase price from 500 to 505 and get a $5,000 seller credit, which in turn the buyer's gonna have $5,000 extra in their pocket. Then you, I guess, would have to talk to the buyer.
I love it.
Right.
I love it. But that's a great point.
But
So,
normally
so
you
if you
can't,
get a higher appraisal, we could increase the purchase price and then ask for a concession for the commission.
right, yeah, but we cannot just, hey, it's like saying, no, I want to finance all the closing costs. You can't really do that, right?
Right.
Unless, and there's a new territory, but there's other down payment assistance programs. Let's say they give you 10,000, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think like the down payment assistance has even cleared that up. Because if you're getting assistance from the state or the county, can you use that for the buyer's commission? I think that's new territory. I
Yeah,
don't know, that's completely,
we don't know.
right, we don't know.
We
And
don't know
my
the answer
biggest
to that.
thing was always VA, because I worked a lot with veterans in the
Well,
past.
VAs, that's very interesting because VAs are not allowed to pay a buyer's agent anything.
At all. Yeah, I know.
Transaction fee either.
So on VAs, we are gonna have to get it from the seller because it can't come from the buyer.
Yeah.
Unless they change that, unless VA comes out and
It's
they
funny,
change that.
As from last week, there's an email that VA has not yet said anything. They haven't said no
Right.
comment before.
Right.
But FHA and conventional have, because there's also a part where when it comes to conventional VAs and FHAs, there's a QM rule, right? Where the buyer cannot pay no more than 3% in closing costs and fees, right? Like in points and fees.
Mhm.
But let's say they're already paying the max in fees, but then they're also asked to, let's just say, pay another 1% towards the buyer's fee. Well, they made it clear that if there is an additional fee, that's not counted in toward that calculation.
Right, so.
But VA is different ballgame.
So yeah, so that's a great one too. So contributions like max, also contributions. So like let's say the max contribution conventional will allow is 6%. Or actually I'll just word it how you worded it. Like if the max fee there allows 3%, if the buyer's paying more, that doesn't count towards that 3%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
FHA and conventional, but VA again.
VA hasn't said anything. So they might come back and change that because that's what would make sense. Because VA veterans should be represented too. They should be able to have
Definitely.
representation and be able to get it covered by the seller, just like an FHA or a conventional buyer would.
But we get to that
So at
scenario.
It was kind of, I get why VAs did that to get, they're protected. They're saying, oh, we are not allowed to charge VAs these fees. But now I think we're gonna have to probably.
That's gonna be very interesting.
David, you got a question?
Yeah, in the scenario that seller does decide to pay buyer's agent and they turn around and say, these are seller contributions, paying 3%, so I would give my max seller contribution, for example.
Interesting.
Wait, repeat that again? Repeat it again?
So seller is paying buyer's agent. So
Right.
the way they look at it is like, I'm paying the other side. So, legally, is that a seller contribution or is that separate? So
I think you can play around with that because in that point, if there's already a clear-cut decision, like, all right, seller is gonna pay some commission, help the buyer to pay the buyer's agent commission, then I'd probably be, I don't know, at this point, I would say an addendum, right? Seller is willing to pay buyer's commission or additional of XYZ number. So then it's not really a credit to the buyer, because instead of me giving it to you as a buyer, then you give it to your agent, no, it means the seller, it means you give it straight to the buyer. And it's like on the CD, just like as it normally would be. So, yeah, I can see that there is gonna be a lot of problem solving and, that's fun.
Well,
That's fun stuff.
we need to figure out
Fun.
when the buyer's short, how can we get our commission? Like, we need to get creative and figure out ways that we can still get that done.
Mhm.
I didn't think about that increase. If your appraise a little over, you can increase the purchase price, ask for a contribution.
I wanna say you probably could do that with down payment assistance programs, because theoretically, you could say, like, let's say my closing cost is 15 grand,
Right, and
and I'm getting take K credit. Oh, no, I'm gonna use only $3,000. I'm gonna pay for everything. I'm gonna pay my closing costs on my own, but the 10K is going for my down payment, not for my closing. You get me?
so
and
I
they'll
need
pay for it.
we need you. I think we need you to find that out. Hometown Heroes and all these down payment assistance. Can we use that? Is that allowed to be used towards the buyer paying the agent's commission?
I'm gonna go out on a hunt and say, yes, that is possible, because out of what I just said right now.
Yeah.
I could say my down payment assistance is for my down payment for the loan, not for my closing costs. So then my closing costs, whatever it is, I'm paying out of pocket, but obviously I have 10K more to
Yeah,
play
and
with.
I agree. I think.
Well, I'll get
If
clarification.
I had a guess, I would say you could.
Yeah, because you could word it like that, like,
Because now our commission becomes a closing cost in a sense, right? It kind of does or it doesn't. It's a fee.
It's a fee.
It's a fee.
it's a fee, but they don't look at it towards the 3% QM rule, because then that, then it becomes like a mortgage guideline. If it's a cash deal, you can do whatever you want, right?
Here's
Like, it doesn't matter.
here's what I see. I mean, obviously, the banks are gonna try to look at it.
Right
When
now.
it comes to the rules of the bank, they just want to make sure the buyer is worthy of the loan. So
Right.
you gotta look at it, does this affect that in any way? No, not really,
I think what's about to happen is that a lot of real estate agents' moral and ethics are gonna really come into play right now, because it's all about word of mouth and negotiating, and then, let's
A lot of
say,
agents are gonna fall off.
yeah, a lot of, and they can get in trouble too, because like, let me just use
Well-
all this DPA for a buyer's agent commission, stuff like that. No, you can get
guys,
really.
there's no reason for you to have to fall off of this. Just
No, yeah.
embrace this document, go into it, practice it, go in there, print it out, read it, know it. Practice with yourself explaining it, practice, get one of your buddies, get another agent in the brokerage, practice going back and forth with it, role play with it. And there's no reason, this is gonna, in my opinion, like everything else that we talked at the beginning, all the downs and ups of our industry, this is just another thing that we're like, oh my God, this is gonna, and then ultimately, it's just gonna be, in my opinion, it's gonna make things better. And this is gonna be like the new norm. And that's it. That's gonna be done.
Yeah, can I add?
Yeah.
I want to add something to that. Although I'm a licensed real estate agent, I don't practice it whatsoever. Like, I don't, those of you guys know me, I don't know. But I really think it's gonna come from the top, right? Especially when you get listing agents, where, hey, and let's say they heard about, oh no, I'm only gonna pay 3% commission, let the buyer deal with it on their own. I think it is try at the that's where it starts, right? When you're getting that listing, say, hey, look, yeah, if we list it for 3%, it's gonna be very hard for buyers that the buyers are gonna have to pay extra commission to help to purchase your property. So if we're gonna be telling other agents, hey, there's only 3% at stake here, there's a possible big chance that there's gonna be less demand to purchase your property, and in turn, that's gonna decrease values. Do you want that to happen? Right? We recommend, listen, at least pay 5-6% commission, continue the old school way and get it done. Start from there, but educate them. If we don't give the commission, we just rely on the new buyer and buyer's agent to figure it out for the buyer's agent to commission. Nobody's going to show the property realistically, right?
Which I had a conversation about that earlier,
Mhm.
and I said, I don't feel like we should push that so much or mention that, because first of all, we're kind of throwing ourselves under the bus in a way. We're kind of making ourselves look bad by saying, we're saying we as realtors are unethical by telling our seller, nobody's gonna want to show your property. And what if that seller,
word it differently, but yeah,
what if that seller wants to buy and you gotta help them buy? They're gonna wonder, well, you're gonna not show me properties where I can.
I think communication is gonna be so huge here, where negotiating tactics is gonna be very important to know how to have a conversation. Forget about negotiating. How are you gonna have the conversation, period, to delegate that same scenario? I'm gonna buy too. It's gonna be very tough and interesting.
Guys, we gotta get our value up. We gotta get our value up as realtors. We need to get our value up as professionals. You guys need to work on your social medias, your Google reviews, your buyer consultation, which we were gonna get into that today, but I don't think we're gonna have time. So don't worry, I'll make sure we get that set up. But we have to, like, more than ever, let everybody know what it is that we do. Okay, I'm gonna work on something that kind of details out everything that we do as agents. Because I want you to be able to explain that. And from now till July, we need to practice that. We need to be prepared. Because again, before you show a property, it's gonna happen come July. You're gonna need to see a oh, I want to see this property. You just start looking at the buyer, want to see it, boom. Oh, but wait, we have to sign this real quick. So we have to do it. Another thing too, guys, that I want you to keep in mind is that that again, we don't have all the answers and I don't know everything, but there is a possibility, like the settlement, and I have to get clarification on this, but to show a property, it doesn't necessarily mean have this document signed. It just means you have to have a document signed. So we could also have like an alternative showing agreement, like for those quick, like out of nowhere scenarios where you don't even have time to maybe consult the buyer, but they want to see it. You don't want to lose out on it, but you don't have time to sit and explain this, and maybe they don't want to sign this exactly. So I'm waiting to see if we can do that and what that looks like. But that's also a possibility always.
And at the end of the day, we're human beings. We evolve, we adjust. So just because of this new law or transition and all that doesn't mean it's like, oh shit, how do I want to deal with it? Like, we're human beings, we will figure it out. Right? Like in anything. Like look at I mean, I wasn't around, but in 2011, you know, it was Wild Wild West with mortgages. And all of a sudden now we have these CDs and loan estimate. If the fees went up $100, we gotta like reduce close to the client. And I mean, again, I wasn't there, but the mortgage loan officers figured it out. Right? Just communication, training, education, right? So I think
yeah, guys, that's why just stay plugged in and contribute and collaborate with each other. Let each other know. Let me know, like, hey, what are your thoughts?
And come to the office. It's fun over here. There's food.
Yeah, you guys are missing out. Pastelitos, cafecito, you know. But yeah, you know, just collaborate with each other, have conversations with each other, and really sink your teeth in this, because July will be here before you know it. And if you haven't even looked at this, if today is the first time you see this, and you don't see this again until July, come July, you're gonna be like, I need help. And then guys, I'm only one person, and it's hard for me to be here for every single scenario, every single time. So please go on Form Simplicity, look at this, read through this, work on how you're gonna explain it. Okay. So I'm actually this is a good time to bring up that I'm gonna bring back Cafecitos with Vic every Monday. And the purpose of it is to kind of talk about filling these gaps that sometimes we don't get to do it in the trainings. So we can further like practice these things, further practice our conversation and our dialogue, and talk about whatever is relevant at the time. So I'm gonna be bringing back Cafecitos with Vic. It's like 30 minutes. I do it Monday mornings. I'm gonna put it on the chat and everything. And it's just a Zoom call. It's not at the office. It's just a Zoom call. And I want to use that 30 minutes. Maybe we'll run a little over 35, 40 minutes, whatever it is, to fill in the gaps of like, okay, well, maybe we didn't get this, or to weekly give you updates on what we are learning, what changes are happening with this, and, you know, having that dialogue with buyers, or different scripts that we can use, you know, when speaking to a buyer. There's going to be, so this Monday, essentially, I want to talk about certain questions that I know are going to come up from buyers and are going to come up from sellers. So like Cafecito with Vic, I'm going to put like, all right, guys, here's this question. Well, how are we going to answer this question? Here's that question. How are we going to answer it? And then maybe next week I say, hey guys, I found another great way we can answer this question. I thought about this, or I'd heard about this. Let's maybe now you can answer the question even better this way. Okay? Yeah.
Can we make a contest? A contest of
Oh my God. Okay, Angela, what do you want? What's the content?
Whichever agent, I guess, I mean, maybe it's in July, right? Has, we're pushing agents to sign this, right? To get this signed, right?
Well, we have.
Okay, great.
So come
So,
July, yeah.
okay, so let's just say, I mean, per month or per every 2 weeks, whoever brings us enough, I mean, just show us this that you guys gotta sign. Maybe we can take it that realtor out to lunch, the team, I don't know.
But this is the buyer broker, this is
Yeah.
between the buyer and,
Sure.
so whoever does the
They
most
gotta show
buyer.
you. Yeah,
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I have to sign it, so they have to show.
okay, perfect. So then you can track everything. All right, cool.
All right, you heard it, guys. So if you do one of these, Angelo and me will take you to lunch, okay?
Yeah.
Where will we be going to lunch to? That's very important.
No, for you, Burger King.
Burger King, that's fast, pues eso no me llena. No, I gotta maintain this body. What's wrong with you?
McDonald's, sorry, no.
McDonald's?
No,
No.
burger. It's-
We could go to Cheesecake Factory.
Cheesecake, I can't. Cheesecake or Cancun, I can't go wrong.
What? You can't go where?
I can't go wrong with both.
Oh, there you go.
Cancun or
The
Cheesecake.
Cheesecake Factory, there you go. That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, those are good. Cancun or Cheesecake Factory, good.
All right, we're gonna be taking everybody in the brokerage to the Cheesecake Factory. We're gonna-
Road trip in Angelo's car.
Yep.
Who knows, we need more people, we need to bring out the SUV, come on, gotta roll deep.
Yeah, look at his car.
All right, guys, so, guys, just dive into this. It's just gonna be we do this already with sellers. We do it with sellers. We come, we get prepared, we get our seller net sheet, we get our listing agreement, we get all our listing presentation. Now we're gonna kind of have to do the same thing with buyers, and we'll adjust. I'm not gonna tell you that I know exactly how it's gonna play out come July, but we will adjust and we will, just my opinion, just try not to cut corners so much and try not to go the easy way on things. Because I can see realtors just saying, oh, you want to see the property? Okay, well, I'm just going to sign this document. I have to sign this and not even talk about it or explain it. Don't do that. Find time to explain it, to talk about it, and discuss it with the buyer. When it's like a last minute scenario, I already know somebody's going to ask me, hey, I got this buyer. He wants to see his property tonight, and we have to like rush to see it. But you know, I can't, like, how do I do the buyer brokerage agreement? So we'll figure that out as we come. Maybe there'll be an alternative document that's just to show that one property, but lets them know we're gonna sign an actual agreement later, you know, something like that. All right. Any other questions? Any other contributions, thoughts?
Is this required by law to show it to the listing agent?
We
Or,
don't,
no.
we're not sure of the answer to that yet.
Okay.
But we are imagining you have to,
Yeah.
because they have to know what to pay. Yeah.
If you were a listing agent, wouldn't you like to know if the buyer has been pre-qualified or pre-approved?
Yeah.
gotta
So
get-
we assume that the listing agent is gonna have to have this document, because they have to know how much commission you put on your document, which everybody's gonna put 3%. So yeah, you know, absolutely. And if you do, what's a good thing, I would probably put the loan originator's phone number and everything in there. Just
Probably.
feel free to reach out. All right, guys, so again, it's May 1st. We got exactly 2 months to get prepared for this. Because we don't have an exact date, but they said mid-July, but just look at it as July, okay? That commission. By the way, here's another thing that that just popped into my head that I recommend that you guys did. I wrote here on my notes. There's a designation. Again, what are we talking about? Let's level up our value. There's a designation called ABR, Accredited Buyer Representative. Add that to your value. Look up the Miami Association, find out when is the next time they're doing it. If the Miami Association is not doing it, usually you can go on the National Association of Realtors website, figure out when it's being held, even if it's like at the Las Vegas Association of Realtors, but you can do it through Zoom, whatever. So it doesn't have to be the Miami Association doing it. And right now they're doing it for free. They're offering it for free to members. Get that designation. That designation, I'm sure they're gonna give tons of value in that class about this buyer brokerage agreement. It's gonna prepare you better, and it's gonna make you more professional. And when you sit down with clients, that's another badge that you have. Not only that, oh, I've sold, you know, 20 million in sales. I've helped, 50 families get into their home. But I'm also a certified buyer accredited specialist, whatever the designation is called. I'm also a certified buyer specialist. So what does that mean? That I have further education, I have a deeper understanding of how to work with buyers, what to look out for, and how to avoid any pitfalls so that I make sure you have the smoothest transaction possible. So look into that. It's called ABR designation. Accredited buyer. Accredited buyer, what's the R stand for? Representative. I was thinking specialist for some reason. Accredited buyer representative. Look into that designation. I'm gonna see if I see that the association is doing it, I'll share it on the chat because I think everybody should jump on it.
Makes sense.
All right. You found it? They're doing it?
I have something to do in the Mondays. Another thing.
So I'll put it on the chat, guys, so you guys can do that. But I recommend it. It's usually on Zoom and it's usually 1 to 2 days. So it is something that you do have to take time out of your schedule to get, but it's worth it and it gives you that edge and it gives you something to give you a slight edge. And right now, guys, you want any little edge, as small as it could be. You want everything you can get. So add value. What's your value stack? What are all the things that make you stand out? What are all the values that you bring to your clients? Yeah, and I think that's it, guys. Work on your CRMs. Next week we're gonna be doing the cafecito, and then we're gonna talk more about how to handle the situation, but on the seller side. So we're gonna talk about more about the listing side of it and the listing presentation side of it. And then after that, guys, we're doing trainings every week, pretty much throughout the next 2-3 months. So everything's already set. We're gonna talk about follow-up boss, real scout, negotiations. Marketing as well. That one we're doing, and after next week, we're going to talk about marketing because we can learn all this stuff, guys. But if our marketing is not on point, then we're not going to be getting buyers anyways to do these agreements with. So we need to make sure we're on point with that.
They have classes until December.
Every month, the Miami Association. All right,
I just.
Cool. All right. So I'll share the link. I'll email it everybody. Or I'll put it on the WhatsApp chat, guys. But they pretty much have a virtual class every month for the rest of the year. So it looks like, yeah, twice a month. They're doing twice a month. Yep. So make sure you guys jump in there and get it. How much is it? No, oh, it's free. And it's free. Psh, jump on that all day. Because it's usually like $200-300 a month. So definitely jump on that. All right, guys. Any questions? Any takeaways? Anybody want to share anything before we end the call? Thank you, Niza. Appreciate it. All right, guys. I hope you guys got a lot from this. I feel like you did because I think it was pretty good. I think we learned some things that we weren't so sure about, and we clarified some things. But we'll keep it going. And guys, Cafecito with Vic, Mondays. I'll share the time with you and the Zoom link on the chat. All right, but it'll be in the morning. All right, guys. Bye, Juju. Bye, May.
Bye. I'll see you in a little bit. Bye.
Bye. Hey, what's up? Hold on a second. All right, data guys. Bye.